I'm Lesley Goldberg. I'm the TV news editor at The Hollywood Reporter, and like you, I'm completely overwhelmed by my DVR. Last August, FX CEO John Landgraf stood before members of the Television Critics Association and coined a term for the growing content bubble, peak TV. With Netflix spending of upwards of $5 billion on original content this year alone, to cable networks like E!, WGN, and Spike joining the scripted fray, it's impossible to keep track of the more than 400 scripted shows that were produced last year alone. 400. 400, plus 700 unscripted. For viewers, TV's new golden age has created a plethora of critical hits and cult favorites, while for writers and producers, it's opened up new avenues to tell pretty much any story of their liking. And for development executives, it's created an ultra-competitive landscape where sometimes even can't-miss reboots have trouble cutting through the clutter. Today, we're going to take a look at the blessing and curse that is peak TV and talk to some of the best in the business. Let's bring them out now. ABC Studios Executive VP Patrick Moran. VP Drama at HBO, Kathleen McCaffrey. CBS Senior VP Drama, Bryan Seabury. Hulu Head of Originals, Beatrice Springborn. Shondaland Partner, Betsy Beers. And last but certainly not least, one of my favorite people in this town, writer and executive producer, Liz Tigelaar.
No one sat near their name tag. We didn't even get close. We're playing like a shell game of cards up here.
I'm here,
I
right?
think we have it right now.
There'll be a quiz. Let's start with a fun one. How many shows are on each of your DVRs?
Thank you for coming.
A lot of Dateline, all the Datelines I have, and Real Housewives.
I have 20 Access Hollywoods easily.
Every home improvement show that has ever aired. Because I don't like to get rid of them.
Oh my God, Fixer Upper.
Fixer Upper is
Any
just
Fixer
like,
Upper.
oh my God, and they're so happy.
They're so happy.
So happy.
And those houses are great.
It's like it's amazing, and they
Bought
always have a
house
clock.
for $60,000.
By the way, sometimes less. Sometimes like 20,000.
But we digress.
Yeah. I mean, as a TV editor, for me, I've got about 30 different season passes, and that's, I think, low, comparatively speaking. But, I mean, in terms of the development process, I mean, how much do you guys try to sample everything? There's just, I mean, to say there's too much is, I think, an understatement.
Yeah, I think I'm the one TV development executive who's not seen Fargo. And literally, like, felt like I had to lie about seeing it when everybody's like, you know, he's on Fargo. I'm like, oh yeah, he's great. He's great on Fargo. Like, I'm probably the one who's never seen it.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
Referencing shows comes up a lot in the job, so you do have to have kind of a level of awareness. I mean, even in a pitch, if it's something meets something and you don't know either of those somethings, you're
But you still go like, oh yeah,
oh,
yeah, of course, yeah.
Fargo meets,
Fixer Upper.
They are kind of the same show. It's kind of cool.
Liz, you know, what are the benefits of peak TV for writers?
What are what?
The benefits of peak TV for writers.
I mean, huge benefit in terms of, you know, 10, 15 years ago, if you didn't staff in June or in May to start work in June, you could potentially be sitting out until the next year. And now there's just so much opportunity. So you don't have to think, I mean, in 3 years, I have not had a traditional staffing season. I haven't watched pilots, I haven't read pilots, I haven't gone out for staffing in the same way. It completely kind of transforms that schedule. And I just feel like all year long, there's a tremendous opportunity. So I think in that way, it's really good. I'm sure we'll explore what's not great about it, but I think for writers, especially, I would say, I mean, really the gamut from staff writer to executive producer, showrunner. There's so many opportunities to create and sell. There's so many places to sell. There's so many new places that you can sell some place that doesn't have their brand necessarily kind of already, I don't know, stamped on them yet. So you have huge opportunity in that capacity. And then as a staff writer, you know, you don't always have to be kind of sitting out waiting. So I think it's been pretty great in that regard.
And for everybody else here, how has that demand for writers really changed on the studio side? I mean, are you seeing more writers juggling multiple projects?
I mean, it's all the opportunity that Liz talks about puts pressure on us. So good for them, bad for us is sort of the simple term to put it. With so many places making so much stuff, it's not just writers and directors and actors, but it's everything from stage space or a line producer or any element that goes into production is just in real short supply. And it forces us to have to get more creative about where we produce some of our shows. We're producing all over the country, all over the world now. When we do it, financially it puts more pressure because we have to invest much further out in stages or in personnel, whatever it is. So it's funny, for all of the artists, it does create an enormous opportunity, but for all of the studios and the production companies, it does put an enormous amount of pressure on us.
I would also say that instead of having people come in and kind of audition for you for those things, like when you're, you know, normally you'd be like wooing actors, and now you're like having production designers come in and like doing a dog and pony show about why they should work for Hulu. So your job has become much more of a kind of like ambassador for your network in a way that you weren't before.
What about on the studio side, you know, in terms of the biggest change that you've seen in the past couple of years? Is it that competition for everybody below the line?
It's the volume. Honestly, that's the simplest way to put it, is just so many places making so many shows. All of that volume just is a very challenging thing to try to juggle. And you're right, it's funny, you know, actors that you know had never heard of now can command a very high quote, and then you find yourself like, we're paying what for who? I mean, you ask yourself that question all the time. Because it's just sort of simple economics, but it is really a volume question in terms of like how many places are producing and what that means in every category.
It is weird. There is such a scramble to that. Like, I remember doing a pilot a few years ago, and it was like, you're in the casting process and the Joneses, and before you even which imploded, so it didn't matter. But before it imploded, we're casting it, and it's like you've never even heard of somebody, and suddenly, you know, they barely come into audition, or maybe you haven't even seen them yet. You're seeing them on tape, and suddenly it's like, you're gonna lose Adelaide Kane to Rain on the CW. Like, you got, if you want her, you gotta get her right. And you're like, I don't know Adelaide Kane. Like, oh my gosh. And the next thing you know, you're so crazy. You're like, we're gonna lose Adelaide Kane on the CW. Like, how are we gonna make the show without Adelaide? Who's wonderful. But it's just like, it turns into this scramble where suddenly you're like, I'll do anything for Adelaide Kane. Like, and literally in the morning, you're like, I didn't even know who Adelaide Kane was, you know? But it just becomes this like crazy scramble that you kind of get like caught up in, where you're like just riding this wave, and at the end, you know, you're like, well, Adelaide Kane's going on Rain, and you know, your show.
So imagine like every decision you're asked to make is like done with a gun to your head, right?
Yeah.
It's that, not just for the actors, but it's for every single thing, and you're just like, oh my God, like it's endless. But yeah, so that's what it's like going through pilot season and production at a studio right now. Yeah, like what she just did.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it puts a huge amount of
network just
pressure.
gets shielded from all of that. So Patrick will be like, is everything okay? And Patrick's like, everything's great. Everything's great. Like, nothing to see here. Stage is good. Getting the actors. They walk in cool and calm with their pitch. So I don't know. We're happy to hear their pitches and buy them and go shoot the pilot.
You know, while I'm picking on you, Bryan, how has the boom in scripted really impacted broadcast? I mean, are you still hearing the same number of pitches?
Yeah, I would say the number of pitches in kind of defined pitch season is down, but for probably the number of pitches out in the community is up. The amount of pitches that, you know, end up coming into a specific place is down, and I think that it ends up working out great for us. I think that the pitches and projects that were meant to be at CBS, or certainly on their face make sense for us, end up coming through our door, and we end up buying about the same amount as we always have, and certainly shooting the same amount and going to series with the same amount. So yeah, I mean, if anything, the sheer amount of it that starts right in July is down, but I don't know, the overall end effect of, do we have enough great scripts to shoot pilots and ultimately great pilots to go to series, we've been really happy.
You're seeing larger commitments to these projects that are coming through. I mean, it seems like everything is getting like a put pilot commitment, or a series, either straight to series or a series commitment.
They are.
There's a lot more than there was 5 years ago.
You and I have to have a conversation after this.
Yeah, we see it again. I mean, I feel like I'm working on, in drama development, 45 things that we buy, and yes, a couple of those are larger commitments. But I think that was, that happened for years and years. It's either about it being multiple buyers or potentially the package was so giant coming out of the gate that it was going to demand it no matter what. But I don't know. I suppose there's more of that, but it's not. I don't know. It hasn't tilted the scales in a huge way for us. We have one or two a year, I would say.
Kathleen, HBO is considered the gold standard.
You can say it was. I know you wanted to. That's what she wrote down, and she kindly changed it for discussion. But it's okay.
Sure.
I could take it.
But I mean, look, obviously, Netflix has beaten you guys out for a couple of different projects, and you've beaten them for a fair share. How has that competition kind of changed the game for you guys?
Well, look, I think what you were saying earlier, the pressure is just now, agents are really smart, and they bring something in. They're like, well, if you're not going to make a full series commitment, we're going to Netflix, we're going to Hulu, we're going to Amazon. Bye. It's just a different. When I started HBO 8 years ago, there was no such thing as Netflix, and so it was Showtime and AMC. That was, those were the main competitors, and now it's a lot. And I do think ultimately, a rising tide lifts all boats. I think it's really good, and it makes us have to be sharper and smarter and more targeted in terms of what we're going to be programming. But it's definitely a new game. It's much harder. We are hearing more pitches because more stuff is competitive, and so we don't just out of the gate anymore just be like, no, that's not for us. Now we want to hear it out and see if there's a version of it that could be for us, et cetera. So it's different.
Beatrice, Hulu is still a relatively new player in the scripted space. What's been the hardest part about getting writers in and producers to come there?
I mean, I think for the first part of it, we had just launched this new iteration of originals in August, so it was the hardest part was convincing people that we were actually going to put our money where our mouth was and invest in marketing and PR and actual real advertising campaigns, which no one really believed until they saw it. And then once that happened, we have a really great word of mouth network where everybody who's worked with us has had a great experience, and that kind of brought, I'd like to say that, I'm sure there's a few that haven't and are just telling us that, but that really helped us bring talent in the door, was sort of this networking of talent who had worked with us, and we're able to speak to, I think, our experience and that we were actually doing what we said we were going to do.
For everybody here, how has the boom in scripted impacted budgets? Are you finding that you're having to spend more to make what you're making, or is it really an entry point into pretty much everything right now?
I mean, I don't think anybody wants to sacrifice the quality, right? Like, no one wants to feel like they're cheaping out on their shows. The other side of this is, with so many places making original content, your stuff has to hold up, right? It has to be as good. And it's no secret that places like HBO or Netflix can spend more money than the broadcast networks, but you don't want to cut into your show and make them less than. And at the same time, the economics have changed, the ad rates are changed, everything else has changed, so you do feel like this pressure where your costs are kind of going up, your revenue is kind of going down, and you definitely feel that squeeze. Am I changing with you? Is that better? Oh, wow. Oh, wow, that's amazing. Now it's like karaoke night here. Oh, my God, guys. This is incredible. Wow. I had no idea. Is that what you sounded like? No, I was just saying how you never want to feel like you're cheaping out on your shows. It's just critical that the quality is there. And I don't think a viewer is like, oh, I'm going to give ABC a pass because it's a broadcast network. And I'm going to let it be kind of cheaper than if they can just turn the channel and watch a Netflix show or something on HBO. So it is harder. It's definitely harder. And we have to be smarter about it. You have to be smarter about how you produce, and you have to be smarter about where you spend your money, how you do this, where you do this, when you do this. Every decision has to become a lot more strategic.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to answer? Okay.
This sounds very stressful.
Very stressful. Now I feel like I have got a booming, the voice of God over here.
You are.
But Bryan seems
It's
very
pretty
relaxed. Bryan seems very relaxed. It feels very stressful for you, and you feel very relaxed. He's like, I don't know, it's kind of the same or less than it always was. Just at CBS. It's all fine.
I'm curious what Betsy has to say about that from your side on the producing side.
What, the money?
No, I know about the money. I got the money. No.
I like money.
Not,
You like money?
just in terms of all of the choices that you're making, you know, just getting through, still Starcross, for instance, some of the shows we've done recently, did you feel like the resources were tighter, were they harder to make decisions?
I mean, it's exactly what you guys are saying, is I think to go back to what we all started with, you guys started with, and I was nodding aggressively. I think, which I do a lot, but I think a lot of it is that I think certainly working with you guys, you do the best you can to give us as many resources as you can so that we can make the best shows possible. But it's a different kind of allocation now because very often you are spending more money for the actor because of the situation you're describing where you don't even get to audition people anymore. You have to actually cast them and make an offer, which some days is great, but other times one of the great things for a writer is that you actually watch your words be spoken by somebody and you do this thing called the chemistry read where you get to see if two people actually have chemistry. And nowadays the risk is high because very often, and sometimes rightfully so and other times because of the marketplace, you end up having to cast people who've never met each other. So you put them on set and there it is.
Yeah, everyone's offer only because it's so competitive.
Exactly. So I think per the allocation, more money goes towards that, and then we have to be slightly more creative in terms of where you put the money on screen. Because especially with pilots, we always talk about you want to see all the money on screen, but when locations are costing so much more. I mean, every city that you can think of has a couple of shows going at any given time, and ABC loves us to do pilots, you know, where we can get benefits that will make sense. But even in cities a couple of years ago where we would come in and there would be crews and there would be people to work with, we have to bring crews in to cities with crews because there are already 3 shows shooting there. And we're shooting this new show in Spain, which is going to be amazing, and we're using locations outside of Madrid. And we're just about to hear that somebody else may be coming in. We're in Spain, you guys. We're in 2 hours north of Madrid, and if any of you think about going there, I swear to God. But even there, we were just having a conversation this week, and it was sort of like, well, wait a second, do we think there's a movie coming in, and what's the story? So all those things, I think, add to the pressure of how you spend the money, where you get the most bang for your buck, and how you can tell a story week to week that's both exciting, it competes with everybody else, but is also manageable.
You guys mentioned the demand for talent, and you know there's so many actors right now, but it's still, as Liz, as you said, it's so competitive even for low-level actors. How thin is the market right now, and are there leads on shows that really surprise you?
You mean like in a bad way?
I think she means in a bad way. I'm pretty sure.
Listen to Karaoke Man, he knows.
You know, it's funny, they were talking about the offer-only situation. It is challenging when you're forced, again, with a ticking clock, to make an offer to an actor. And this happened to us this year. An actress that you know, we pursued her, she didn't want to read or meet or whatever. So she shows up to the table read, or do anything. She shows up to the table read, and she had a completely different take of the character in her head. So everybody's sitting there thinking, like, what is she doing? Why is she reading the part this way? And we could not really, with not enough time, kind of refocus her take on the character before we started shooting. So not having opportunities to actually engage with talent and make sure that we're on the same page and we're looking at this character the same way, all of those challenges certainly impact the result.
I thought that was going a whole different way. I thought her take on the character was brilliant, and you had never thought of that, and then there was a rewrite, and now it is...
Because you're so happy and relaxed.
I really thought this was going very positive.
Real glass half full over here, guys.
Liz, and right now I know you don't have an overall deal. First of all, is that by design? And you know, for the rest of on the studio side, or even for Betsy, who does, is that still the gold standard? Is that the end all be all for writers? And what are the benefits and the pros and cons there?
Well, I think it can. I think there's 2 sides to it. On the one hand, first of all, so for those of you who don't know what an overall deal is, it's basically where a studio makes an overall deal with you, which is to basically say, we're going to pay you X amount of money to exclusively work for us. And it means that you'll develop with that studio, and through that studio, you'll try to sell shows to, presumably, their, you know, if it's ABC Studios, ABC Network, but maybe, hopefully, other things too. And you'll staff on their shows, basically. So for job security, it's amazing. And I think it can be great when you're at a studio whose shows, you know, I spent time at ABC Studios, and those were all shows that I'm very compatible with as a writer. So that was a really great fit for me. On the other hand, when you're at a studio, if you run out of shows, let's say, or there are shows that you're not as compatible with, then you become kind of limited. So I think, you know, I had the luxury of getting to be in an overall deal, and then I also had the luxury of choosing not to be in an overall deal. I wanted to work on Bates Motel more than anything. It was like a show I was obsessed with. I love Carrie and Carlton. It was my dream show, and I was able to go work on it because I wasn't in a deal. I was able to do casual because I wasn't in a deal. So there is something about it that gives you more freedom that's really great, but you're scrounging your year together more, and what's hard about it is whenever you work, you automatically get put into positions. You might sell something, and that's in first position. And then you might get staffed on a show, and now that's in second position. And suddenly, you're in all these positions, and it actually makes it harder to get other work. So there are pros and cons of each. I mean, most of the people I know who are in overall deals or are considering going in have the same debate. Should they do it? Should they not do it? Usually when you get out of it, you just long for it. And when you're in it, you long to choose what you're doing. So it can be a really great thing, and then it can be limiting too.
What about on the studio or even HBO side? Is that still something that you guys are pursuing? Is it hard? Are you finding more people don't want to sign?
Just to be clear, I tried to keep Liz. I tried very hard to keep Liz in a deal. She left. She wouldn't stay.
I'll be begging him soon to take me back.
You know, the upside to having a roster of talent like that is that you, in an environment where everything is in short supply, I have a stable of writers that I can go to and some directors that I can go to and say, hey, I need help on a show. And, you know, for selfishly, what Liz was talking about, because they're in a deal with me, they're assignable. So I can say, no. I'm asking you, I'm phrasing it like a question.
Go to
but
Nashville.
It's actually,
Go to Nashville now.
I phrased it
Run,
as a question,
don't walk
but it was
to
actually like a statement. So when I said, hey, Liz, would you mind helping out on Nashville? What I really meant to say was, Liz, show up to Nashville on Monday at 9. So it's sort of how it works. So having those resources available to you is really critical to keep these shows stable, to make sure you have enough bodies to work on these things. So for me, selfishly, and having great talent like Liz, you want as many of those people available to you so you can, you know, deploy them as you need them.
And it also helps in another way because there's a stable of those writers. The other situation that we get into is, as you say, you're in second, first, third position. And what's happening a lot now is that because there's a demand for writers on all the shows, in the olden days, back when dinosaurs ruled the earth about 5 years ago, we would never, ever bring somebody in and have them in second position for us. Like, they would have to be available for us all the time because, God forbid, they should be doing something else. And it seems to me, I think I'm right, is that for you guys, now you have to be a lot more flexible about the fact that you might be waiting for a bus for part of the season, or that your writer may have to leave a little early to do development. And I think, you know, in the world of my partner is a writer, and we work with writers, but we also have a production company, I think it's phenomenal that there's so many opportunities for writers now. The flip side is, as a producer, you have to sort of assemble a room of people so that you know there'll always be somebody in there, because otherwise there's a very large possibility that people will drop out all at the same time. So it's become a lot more of a jigsaw puzzle to actually put a group of writers together to staff on a show, I think. I mean, what do you guys think?
You have to be way more creative and flexible. It's like a giant game of Jenga. You have your writers, you're hoping they're all going to stay there, but someone's pilot might get picked up if their pilot happened to be in first position. And the other challenge, you know, you talked about 5 years ago, but it has changed so much. You knew the cycles were all the same for everybody, right? So all of the shows would get picked up, and everybody would be staffing at the same time. but because all of these sort of newer platforms and networks are not on a traditional schedule, so they might have a pilot that could go at any time in the year, not just January, February when they used to go. So now you're working kind of round the year, trying to figure out like who's going to be around and when, and it does become really, really complicated.
In terms of competition, with Netflix, the Hulus, the Amazons, the WeTVs getting into scripted, is that competition for projects a good thing in terms of, as Bryan said, multiple offers? Is that a good thing for the landscape, or is it having a negative impact on the business?
I mean, I want to be glass half full too and say it's a good thing. I think, again, it pushes you to be, pushes writers to be this whole we were talking before about like breaking through the clutter, right? That's getting harder and harder to do, truly. Like, and I think that we're all using the same catchphrases in terms of like we need someone with a fresh voice and a point of view and an undeniable character and like all that stuff. And so there's a similarity to all of that, but that's kind of good too, that everyone's looking for to make the best possible product. And I think then it becomes, fine tuning it for your brand. What's your brand versus my brand versus you know what I mean? And so ultimately, I think it's good, but it is stressful too.
And Kathleen and I know each other well also because we're in the same building. So anytime anyone pitches to us, they just go downstairs. So we'll go, oh, are you guys going to HBO? You headed up to the 4th floor? And like a lot of times they like kind of like look at the ground and like are ashamed of it and we're like, it's okay.
Do you guys ever horse trade in the elevator?
Do we
Like stop in the middle and go like, do you want her? I want her. Do you want her? I want her.
Yeah. Do you see though? It's really like just to comment on that. It's like we're like the staunch HBO people, and then you see all the Hulu kids with like their sweatshirts and their earbuds, and they're like it's like a college campus.
Like a red cup
and I'm
party.
Like, what are they doing?
Hulu's a red
You get
cup
on
party.
Friday, you go down, the doors open at Hulu, and there's like a keg party, and you're like, what's going on down there? Like we have bagels upstairs.
We've had some HBO people kind of try to sneak into our kitchen because we also have a beer tap there. So yeah.
We don't have a beer tap at ABC, do we?
And we
No
also
beer tap, not even bagels, nothing.
Last meeting, it was all just water.
Really? Out of like a cup, not even out of a
In a
can.
glass. In a glass.
We're all about the cups now.
Here's what they're not saying that's sort of tough. The competition, I think that places like HBO, Netflix, Hulu, they cast a really great halo for their projects and their shows. I mean, thank God we have Shondaland, because Shondaland also casts a great halo, and we would not attract the talent that we have without Betsy and Shonda. But most of our shows don't have that. So, and I would tell the head of the network, I'm like, you're the last stop on the train of pitches. Like, you're the last stop. Like, they're starting at Netflix, and then they're going to go to HBO and Showtime, and then maybe, if the train is still going, they're going to make their way to the broadcast networks. So they have to work that much harder, I think, to attract talent, to attract actors, to attract directors. It is harder on the broadcast side, I think, to remain competitive with how sexy it feels to be at the new kids on the block like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon. I do think it's not a level playing field exactly. Mm-hmm. And it does put the burden on us to sort of, when we're working in the broadcast space, to sort of work harder and do better.
And you guys have also, you've pushed into the world of, back in the Paleolithic years, 5 years ago, 9 times out of 10, really, the orders would be anywhere from 20 to 24 episodes. 24 for us for Grey's, usually 22 for the other shows. And you very aggressively started moving into the networks did, agreeing to fewer episodes so that we can compete more aggressively with you guys, because very often to get that amazing piece of talent that you want, they want to be able to do movies in the summer. So that would determine a lot of the choices. You have somebody phenomenal coming in and you think they would be miraculous for your show. So if you can do 15 episodes, if you can do 10 episodes, all of a sudden the doors the doors opened in a different kind of way. And it's just another way that I think networks trying to adapt to the new world. And it also, I think, for the writers, makes life a lot. It's certainly a different kind of storytelling, and sometimes it's a great thing for them to be able to do. You can probably speak to this, 15 episodes or 10 episodes as opposed to 22 to 24, which is terrific for some shows, but other shows, you're pedaling pretty hard to the finish line.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a 22 is a kind of, it's like a very ambitious, slightly gross number to have to do. It's just when you're doing 22, see the difference is when you start in the room on a network drama, you're usually starting like 1st of July or 1st of June, and you're beginning to shoot by mid-July. So you have 6 weeks. And if you're on a new show, that means you have 6 weeks to find what the show is on top of just getting the show done. So really when you start, you're already like, you feel like you're already 2 months behind. So you're kind of just trying to dig out of this hole versus, you know, for casual, we start basically the number of weeks before if we have 13 episodes, we start 13 weeks before. If we have 10 episodes, we start 10 weeks before. So we ostensibly have time, if you're doing an episode a week, to have all the episodes done by the time we start shooting. And what that gave us an opportunity to do first season was find the show, you know, make mistakes sometimes, have the network come in and help us course correct. But it wasn't done under this panic of we're going to have to be, you know, also shooting this the next day. So I think that can make a big difference too.
In terms of the scripted boom, you know, how has that and the competition from 7,000 different outlets really forced each of some of your networks, maybe the Hulus, to kind of lean in and define what your brand identity is? And you know, does it behoove Hulu to know people what a Hulu show is, and so forth?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we are, again, since we just launched these shows in August, I think we are still defining that and seeing what works and what doesn't work for us, to be honest. And part of the luxury for us is we can be informed by our acquisitions. So, you know, Hulu has a million other shows that can tell us what people watch or what people aren't watching or what we don't have. And we use that as, I'd say we use the data and the metrics as a piece of it. We are not, you know, our entire business is not driven by an algorithm, which is why we still have jobs. But I think, you know, that's the fortunate thing for us is that we have a bit of a roadmap for us to help kind of hone in on what that is and what we're looking for because of those pieces.
Do you guys think that shows naturally find the right network? Find the right home? Cable?
That's interesting. Usually, not always. CBS.
CBS.
Yeah. Remember the X List? I loved that show.
Oh, the X List, yeah. And Love Monkey.
And Love Monkey. I loved Love Monkey. I watched every episode.
I mean, I can't speak for the other networks, but again, I do think when we are hearing pitches, you know, I'm listening to that pitch to determine if it's a CBS drama or not. And for whatever that means in the four of us hearing the pitch, we at least have something defined for ourselves for what we think a CBS show is. And we're constantly looking to stretch that. And, you know, in the summer we do things like Extant and Under the Dome and Brain Dead. And then we have, you know, other types of shows that are on in the fall. But I think there are a lot of shows that we end up putting on our air in a good way. I say this in the best possible way that wouldn't fit on anybody else's air, and I think that helps define CBS in a really strong way.
You also go through a development process once you sell it, right? So you notes on scripts and notes on a cut and all of those small decisions. I think, you know, if it wasn't a CBS show exactly when it started, it sure as hell will be when it's finished, you know, like just by the natural way that the process goes, not in a bad way, but that's sort of how the shaping of it goes. I mean, in the best possible way. I know, I feel like I made the non-CBS CBS show for you guys so many times, like the X List, and you're like, what are we doing on CBS? But do you feel differently about that?
This could be therapy. Right. This is good.
No.
Hash it out, guys.
No, you're totally right. If there's something that's taking it, if the writer, if somebody's going in a direction that doesn't make sense for us, of course we're gonna steer you back. We talk a lot amongst ourselves about making sure, again, 45 things in development. Let's try to help them become, through our notes, the best version that show is going to be. I'm not sitting here trying to turn 45 shows all into the same thing of what I think. I mean, you know, it's writers who came, you know, the Kings coming in with Good Wife, you know, writers who've come in with extraordinary takes that then helped us stretch our brand and grow what we were. It didn't really come from the executives. I don't think it came from the writers who came in with a great show and maybe even taught us a little bit more of what a CBS show could be.
Do you think you use summer shows as a way to stretch your brand too? Because it seemed like that's something really interesting you guys have done.
Definitely.
Where you like seem to have one brand, but then I was really impressed by what you did with like dipping your toe in different arenas for the summer, because you sort of opened up the world of kind of like gigantic cataclysmic events that happen to things that are creepy and interesting.
Totally.
Like I like when Under the Dome came on, I was just like, this is such a great summer show. And then you've now followed suit a couple of times. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, just as a development executive, it's been great. As a fan of just TV, I've loved it. And as you talked about shorter orders, those have been 13 so far, and that's not something that we're doing in the fall. So I don't know. It's stretched the brand and been great.
In terms of what gets a show renewed, I mean, we've seen it's obviously so hard to cut through with so much competition. I think Landgraf has said that he's got a formula where the audience gets a vote, critics get a vote, and then what they've heard about the pitch for the next season is the determining factor. And 2 out of 3 will get it renewed. But the bar for a renewal, I mean, there really isn't a bar anymore because the numbers don't make sense. Is TV immune from failure? I mean, what does failure look like in peak TV? I mean, does a network have to go under in order for that to be a failure?
Just took a dark turn, didn't it?
I'm going to say, even over here in Sunnyland. I feel like in my range, just a tiny bit over that one. I don't know.
I'm coming up with my glass half full answer.
Do it. Come on. We're counting on you.
I don't even know that I understand the question completely. I don't know. Look, we're it has people in different departments than me are putting together a schedule every May, and they're doing it with the existing shows, figuring out which one of those are coming back, and looking at a lot of comedy, drama, and reality pilots to figure out what the best schedule possible is. So I don't know. That's what they're putting out second week of May every year, and I don't know. I think they keep putting out pretty darn good schedules.
Yeah, I mean, I think too the harder shows to talk about and the ones that are more interesting now for peak TV are the ones that are on the bubble, and a lot of those shows. What's great for us and what's really informative is that a lot of those shows, they'll come to us and say, are you picking up the streaming rights on this for next season? Because if you are, that will pay for a piece of our budget and we'll renew the show. So the ecosystem has changed a little bit, but also I think, with social and with that second window, the conversation, it's pretty clear when a show's not a hit or is not doing well in terms of just numbers, advertiser interest, but it's those bubble shows that I think we're seeing a more interesting conversation on now that we have those other factors to weigh. And I mean, Nashville being an example of that. So
thank you
just
for that,
giving
by
you
the way.
props, yeah.
You want to talk about
Nashville? It's a complicated question. It's these are, to Bryan's point, there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time that just look at the economics of these shows, right? On the studio side, we get a piece from the network, and then we sell the show internationally. We have the streaming rights, we have the domestic rights. So it's a giant puzzle that you put all of these pieces together, and all of that you hope covers the cost of the show, and then a little extra so that you're making something back. But it's tricky though when each one of those line items starts to feel a little bit tighter, right? And I think it's true that when you get to a place like Nashville, which I'm so happy that we're able to keep alive, the economics were tight, and I'm happy we were able to sort of make this work with Hulu and CMT. And then there are shows that we have that are really a labor of love, like American Crime, which was renewed for season 3, which is a show that I love. It's a fantastic show, and John Ridley is sort of a genius, and not a sort of huge ratings hit, but there was so much support for it internally that we really wanted to give it another shot. So I do think if there's a certain degree of passion for some of these shows, that certainly helps in keeping some momentum and some traction there and sort of keeping the conversation alive. But it is a complicated equation, and you do feel sort of the pressure, right? You do feel the pressure from, not making as much money as you used to, but costing more than it used to. And you do feel like you're coming up on this sort of, weird kind of tipping point where the economics are becoming more and more strained. But it goes back to what I started with, was that you never want to make a show that you feel like you are making less than, right? Like you still want to support the show in the right way. But it's tricky and it's complicated.
Before we kick it to audience questions, loaded one here for you. Have we hit the peak of peak TV?
I don't think so. I'm going to start. I don't think we have, and I'll tell you why. Because I think when there's a great television show, we all make time to watch it. When it was the Christmas holidays and everyone was talking about The Making of a Murderer, you know, we all found 10 extra hours to watch that show. Like no one wanted to be behind, you know what I mean? Like somehow we made it work. And when I got a call saying you have to watch The Night Manager, I found 6 hours over that month to watch that show. So when there's a great show and people are talking about it, you know, just as a consumer of television, like I want to see it. I want to be part of that conversation. You know, and somehow, as busy as we all are, we all have incredibly taxing, complicated, very time-consuming jobs, and yet we all find time to watch a great show when we hear about a great show.
I like that you get a call of someone telling you to watch something.
You
have to watch The Night Manager. Click.
Yeah, we have some demanding folks over at ABC.
Wow.
So as a consumer of television, I feel like we've not yet hit the peak. As someone who makes television, I think it's hard. But as someone who just likes to go home and sort of watch something, I think that we can still all carve out time for something great.
Good answer. You're here.
We're going to open it up for questions. Any questions here? In the front.
This is for Patrick. How did American Crime land on ABC? Because it seems like it's such an epic show. And with ABC programs, it seems like it should be on HBO or Showtime.
Right. It's funny. Sometimes we think about ideas amongst ourselves as development executives, and we really wanted to do something about sort of race and racial relations in the United States. And I had worked with John Ridley on a show called Platinum back when I was at UPN that aired twice, I think, but he remembered who I was, and when I called him up, we sat down and we had this conversation. And Trayvon Martin was big in the news at that point. So we pitched this idea to John about a trial that kind of captures the country's attention. And John went off and came back and said, I don't want to do a big trial. I actually want to do a very small crime story and watch and see how it sort of ripples out, in this particular community. And it was funny. He wrote the script, and he's a fantastic writer. But it wasn't until I saw the auditions that I was like, oh shit, like this is a really like bold show for ABC. Like I don't think this is going to match up with Dancing with the Stars very well. So I was a little worried. And then he turned this pilot in, and it was so specific, and it had such a strong point of view, and it had a real sense of authorship. And we all kind of fell in love with what John did. And Paul Lee, who was running the network at the time, he called me and he goes, well, how is it? And I said, well, it's great. Part of me wants you to put it on the air, but part of me wants you to pass so I can sell it to Netflix. We'll buy it in a second, I think. And to Paul's credit, he put it on the air and he supported it. And that first season and that second season, like it's a challenging show, and it does feel a little bit like, a departure on ABC, although it does feel very character-driven, and it does sort of tackle some tough subjects, and I think it does it with a very strong point of view that's uniquely John. So I give the network a lot of credit for sticking with the show and getting behind the show. And I think that, when done correctly and done that well, I think, you see these networks sort of getting behind a show creator like John Ridley. So, yeah, but it was a slightly strange sort of journey getting there.
No, we put everything on the air that we ever wanted to.
I'm not sad about
It's
anything.
perfect.
I have no regrets.
Yeah, I'll go.
No regrets ever.
When I was a producer, somebody came into me and pitched me a show called Criminal Minds.
Oh.
And in my defense, it was chasing one serial killer through an entire season. And I said, so do we almost catch this guy every week? And at one point he said, we do catch him in episode 8. And I said, what? It was a copycat. And so that was an easy pass for me. And then it turns out Mark Gordon was like, no, it's a serial killer every week. And then he went on to make millions and millions of dollars. So that's why I'm not a producer anymore.
Anybody else?
My question's for Kathleen. I was just wondering if HBO, I've purchased in the past, HBO is limited in the numbers, in the hours of original content you have. Has there ever been any discussion at HBO to expand and go more hours of original content?
Yeah, we tried to open Monday a few times years ago. I think we did it once with Big Love, and then obviously we had In Treatment kind of every night of the week. Of late, and this is not, I would want to be careful to say, like, this is not a plan of the network. This is my great hope. Now that we have HBO Now, I really would love to program originals for HBO Now. I don't think we can yet. There's something with the platform. We launched it, pretty quickly to get it out there. But in terms of the traditional gold standard of it all, the people who I work for like the idea of HBO Sunday nights. That said, we know that it's competitive and there's so much good stuff coming in that I personally would just love to be able to to program for the platform. So we'll see. I'm hopeful, but we're still 9 p.m. drama, 10 p.m. half hour, 10:30 p.m. half hour, and that's it. And then John Oliver after that.
Is there any chance that we might be moving more towards limited series, or the way the British do it, and they sort of give a series how many episodes it needs, kind of thing, or are the economics just too prohibitive for that?
We're doing a ton more limited. I don't think it's it's just a natural progression. Don't you feel like now people are seeing things as one season? I think it's an attention span thing for the audience. It's like, something like that 6 or 8 episodes, or 10, you can just be like, yeah, I have that, I can find that, and so we still traditionally very much on the drama series want things that are continuing, but on the drama series side, we want things that are continuing, but we're definitely open to a story that's told in sort of one shot. I think that's what's coming in the door anyway for us, a lot of it, so.
Do you think that network TV will move away from a 22-episode format to a 13-episode format to follow some of these other platforms?
It's harder. The full season, the 22, the 24, the economics sort of like lean so far in that direction. We take a much bigger hit when it's a shorter order. And because we don't have another revenue stream like an HBO, you really relying on sort of building a library of episodes, which is harder to do when it's fewer than 22. Creatively, it's great. It's great for the writers. It's great for the producers. But I think in the broadcast space, I think it'll probably be more of a portfolio approach where some shows can go shorter, but many of them I think still need to do the full season. I don't know if you feel different.
Definitely the portfolio approach here. Just like what Betsy was saying about our summer shows, those, I think creatively were designed to go 13, and then a lot of our shows in the fall creatively are designed more for the 22, and it's something that we're aware of, the writers are aware of when they come in to pitch to us. If their show doesn't make sense storytelling-wise for 22, then, it probably belongs somewhere else, or it's something like what we're doing in the summer.
Now that there is so much demand for writers and showrunners, you're not only buyers of the network, you're also sellers, because you need to sell your competitive advantage and have people work for you. So for each of you individually, if we can, what do you tell people is your competitive advantage for why they should be selling to you?
Who are you?
That's intense.
I was told there would be queso.
I can answer for Hulu, which it's pretty simple. It's that, we've just launched new originals, and so if you come on as a showrunner or creator to our network, you're looking at helping to define a brand that is still being defined, and that's an exciting thing. You look at the shows that defined AMC, Breaking Bad, Mad Men. You look at the shows that defined HBO, and that's an exciting place to be, and I think an opportunity that doesn't really exist anymore.
I agree.
So with all this content, there's a lot of genre bending and genre blending that I'm noticing less and less multicam comedies on TV, the traditional format. Do you see like a time when it'll completely be extinct, or do you think there'll be a resurgence in multicam comedy?
Well, CBS has a whole bunch.
They're hanging on.
Netflix has Fuller House now.
And The Ranch.
In the ranch.
Yeah, so there's a lot more. So do you see that coming back anytime soon in other formats?
Well, I mean, we did a comedy pilot that unfortunately didn't get picked up this year, but it was a hybrid and it was multicam, and I gotta say it was really fun. I also sort of feel like you always get through a point where the pendulum swings and you go back to something that starts to feel fresh again. I mean, if you talk to people in the Paleolithic era, nobody would have touched a miniseries with a 10-foot pole about 5-10 years ago. I mean, it was like it went from being one of the genius, or TV movies, like the genius things of all time, to not viable, not viable, not viable. I think there's a kind of story you can tell comedically with multicam that you can't tell with single cam, and I mean, you guys obviously have done incredibly well doing it, but I think there's hopefully room for it because it just gives you more kinds of story you can tell. And I think the main thing is finding the right kind of show for a multi-cam or hybrid, as opposed to just assuming something is a hybrid or just assuming something is a single cam, because I know you guys very often talk about what format is better or not.
Right. I think the trick with the multicam is they're really hard to pull off. They're really, really tough to make work, to make funny, to make feel sort of fresh and relevant. And yet a single cam, it's funny because we will go through a table read and it'll be a single cam comedy, and yet it'll all be taking place in a bar, and we'll look at each other and be like, why are we doing this as a single cam? Like, it should have just been a multicam. So you do want to challenge the form on both sides to make sure that the single cams are in fact need to be a single cam, and that on the other side that a multicam can still feel kind of fresh and relevant.
I think it also has a dirty word. I mean, it's considered a dirty word, multicam, but there, as you know, are plenty of shows that do incredibly well as multicams, and we're definitely open to it. We just haven't found the right one.
So, when you guys are buying now, are you still interested in looking for shows that can be syndicated, or are you leaving that more to like the streaming services and going for like fresh new content every season, so that play over and over and over again?
We're definitely. I don't know that the buying strategy has changed, at least for CBS. I think we're looking for shows. You know, again, kind of a hallmark of a CBS show is a show that can run for a lot of seasons, and so that it's definitely something that when you walk through the door, again, we're looking for great characters and where's your drama and conflict going to come from, and also is this a show that is built to last for many seasons, and that's just something that we have always looked for and continue to look for.
It seems like part of the assumption of TV is that we'll be able to go back and watch all of these shows that we're missing so many. I'm wondering about how you sort of like assess the long-term value of these shows that we've made. Is that a consideration? I think the previous question sort of goes to that, but like, how much do you guys think about the lasting value of these shows?
Interesting. We're all.
I know. It's
Clearly living
It's just a hope more than it's something.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You just hope they last, and you want to be as creatively supportive as you can, and you hope that the first season is wonderful, and that leads to a wonderful second season. Then you're like, well, maybe this will go 5, and you know what I mean? You just sort of hope for it, and I think it's hard to predict, especially at sort of the early pitch phase. Or, I mean, you always just sort of like want it to go a long time.
It's really hard to predict. You want it to just be great first.
Yeah.
There's so many sort of like boxes you're trying to check. It's like, is this going to be a good show, first of all, and then is it going to go?
It's like, is this going to be a good outline?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then a
It's
good
literally
pilot,
that.
and then
Like
are we going to get it
script, like,
tested?
yeah,
It is.
yeah.
There's so many hurdles to cross. I will tell you, there was a time, Betsy keeps saying, like, in the olden days, but you did ask yourself when you heard a pitch, will this go 7 seasons? That was part of the boxes you had to check. Can this go 7 seasons? And now we don't really ask ourselves that question anymore. I think now it's just, is this a great show that can possibly cut through the clutter, that can attract a really passionate fan base, and that, God willing, we can get more than 1 season out of it. I think you raised a good point. When we were working on, I worked on Prison Break in its first year, and everyone kept saying, well, it's only 8 episodes. You'll never do more than 8 episodes. And it was strong enough to kind of get more than 1 season out of it. But I think the criteria about what we pursue, that has shifted quite a bit.
It's like sometimes you go for a bigger idea than almost just classically a movie idea. Or I would have called classically a movie idea, which is the premise is huge. So it's how long can you sustain that premise, but sometimes just for the value of being able to break through with that premise, because for marketing reasons, it gives you something gigantic, which may get the attention. And then the hard part is, I guess, when what you do season 2 or 3, but because we always creatively, we 9 times out of 10 sit and try to think in the back of our heads, can I see this going? You know, I think just internally with us, a lot of the stuff that we're attracted to is there an engine that can keep it going? So, but there seems to be a lot of space for both.
I also remember, like, when I did Life Unexpected, it was when I sold it. Oh, thank you, David. When I sold it, it was called Light Years, and then we shot the pilot, and then we needed a new title, and it got picked up right before upfronts, and I found out as I was getting on the plane that the new title, because Don Ostroff was very into acronyms at the time, it was going to be called Parental Discretion Advised, but it was going to be called PDA. And I remember sitting on the plane, obviously being like so beyond happy, but I was like, is PDA a show that like, it sounded like a multicam to me, like, and it's another episode of PDA, you know. And also it was like about parents and their kid, and I felt like they're all making out. Like, I don't know, it just sounded. I just remember thinking, like, I don't think PDA is a show that like sticks around. Not that Life Unexpected stuck around that long, but I felt like with PDA it was really like off quick. So I don't know. I sometimes think of that with titles. To your question, like, does it just sound like a show people are going to care about in 10 years? PDA did not.
This will be our last question.
I'm casting associate. I've gotten to work on a bunch of ABC shows, not maybe that everyone's seen.
Bless your heart.
Patrick saw them.
Killer Women and Wicked City.
Oh yeah, those two, yes.
I love so many ABC shows that have these strong female leads. And when I got the job on Wicked City, I was like, this is on ABC. There's like no strong female. He's killing females, and also ABC. I love the diversity that's pushed. And I'm like, there's like basically no diversity. Obviously it like wasn't the right network, I guess. Do you know anything about what made ABC want to even try it? Because it was risky and bold of them to try.
Right, and I do think for the networks, again, all of the decisions are so complicated, and I do think when the networks are picking up their pilots and sort of making some of these scheduling decisions, sometimes going with like a bigger idea that they think will generate some noise, and I think doing a period piece and looking at this kind of Bonnie and Clyde kind of relationship at the center, I think there was a moment in time when ABC got very excited about that idea. You know, clearly didn't connect with an audience, maybe for all of the reasons you just listed. So you can't blame them for trying. I did really like working with that team of people, and it just was one of those that didn't stick.
That's actually all the time that we have. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to all of you. Thank you for ATX for organizing this great topic. Enjoy.